Hello, everybody. We'll get started a few minutes after the hour. I'm going to post a link to our awesome agenda. Please mark your attendance, and if you have any items you wish to add to our agenda today. Again, we'll get started in just a few.
Hey, Krobe, how's it going?
Living the dream.
The dream on a Monday.
I know, right?
That's impressive.
It is.
Hey, Krobe, you are OpenSSF operations now. Excellent. Did Jennifer give you the host link or something like that? Or you were just the first to show up? So
I have had the host link that predates the current administration. Since I was one of the few people that ever showed up early for the TAC call.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll start assigning you some tasks right away.
Groovy. So I'm most excited, Anne, because the car I bought back in October arrives tomorrow.
Ooh.
That's exciting.
I ask what kind of car?
You may. I got the most impractical thing ever. I got the Jeep Wrangler 392.
Ooh, sounds fun though.
We'll never make anything like it ever again.
Wow.
I'll have a little fun for a while. All right. I will post the agenda one last time. If you could please mark your attendance. And if you have any items you want to add, I would love that.
Just small point. David shared a link to the Zoom call on the mailing list today, and that one was invalid for me. So I shared one from the calendar just now. So we should probably try to distribute the correct link, I think, or just triple check people get it.
Sure. I'll talk to Jennifer and see what we can do about that. There was, I know that David and one other person had kind of goofy, different, like 2 different times. So they just may have an old invite, but I'll take a look and see. All right. Well, I would like to welcome everybody to the January 24th edition of quite possibly the best working group within the OpenSSF, the Vulnerability Disclosures team. Go Team Vulnerability. I will post the link one last time to the agenda. If you could please mark your attendance, and if you have any items you would like to talk about. We have one item so far. I will open the call. Do we have any new friends to the group that wanted to introduce themselves and say hello?
Hi, I'm attending. It's been a while, a couple of months, but I'm back. I'm now a part of the Dan Kaminsky Fellowship, and I'm doing open source security research full time now.
Don't call it a comeback. You've been here for years.
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome back, Jonathan. I'm glad to have you. Anybody else wish to say hello that they're new here?
Hey everyone, Adam here. Wait, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So Adam here from the hunter.dev team. So just dropping by this week's call.
We're quite excited. You are a very exciting meeting note we're going to talk about in a moment. Anybody else, any other new friends that wanted to say hello?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alma, and I'm a program manager with NCC Group. And I am here to learn, and hopefully I'll be able to join with my work email because I only could use my personal email to join. So hopefully I'll figure it out. But anyway, looking forward to learning.
Excellent. Welcome. Anyone else want to say hello before we move on into our prime time meeting point?
And hi, I'm not new, but it's been a few months. I've had quite a large work log for the past couple months, so great to see everybody again. And my name is Crystal Hazen. I'm a program manager at HackerOne and also on the leads team for B-Side Security San Francisco.
Welcome back, Crystal.
I'll say hi again as well, since there are some new faces. I've been once before, but I'm Kate. I'm a relatively new product manager at GitHub, working on the security advisory team, and so excited to collaborate with you all.
Welcome, welcome. I heard a rumor you guys might have changed something for the better.
I can probably do a quick reintroduction as well, because I haven't participated in 6 or 7 months. I'm a little bit unsure. But my name is Morten Linderud. I do open source as a hobby. I'm part of the security team at Arch Linux. Yeah, that's essentially what I do. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome. And welcome back to everybody. All right.
Thanks. Feeling less bad now that I know that I'm not the only one that had a few busy months there.
Things happen. Computers are just the worst. All right. So we had a request that we wanted to talk to Adam from the hunter.dev team. Anne, were you the one that brought this up, right?
Yeah, I can kind of give background, kick things off.
Right. I'll set it and you can spike it.
Perfect. Volleyball was never sported in, so I just hit it right. Anyways, so yes, Adam is from hunter.dev, and I just want to say first off, thank you. Adam is based in the UK, and so I know it is very late, and so I really appreciate you swinging by this group. I think a couple of you, I know this has come up in various discussions within this group on, some GitHub issues, on open wall forums, kind of bouncing around Twitter. So Adam, by all means, please correct me if I get anything wrong about how your platform works or your business works. It is a bug bounty program that its scope is all of open source. And I think what is unique about it, as I understand it, is that its scope is all of open source. It is not distinct to projects that sign up with Hunter. And I think that's creating kind of some tension and concern in the open source and research communities. And so I invited Adam here. I said, let's have a chat. There might be some conflicting perspectives, but let's definitely, everybody here wants to improve open source security and believes vulnerability disclosure is an important part of it. So let's chat it out. Adam, I figured, we'd give you the floor, maybe give us an overview so everybody's on the same page about the program. People can ask some questions and we'll see where the discussion goes from there, if that sounds good.
Sure. Thank you very much for the intro. I guess just to begin with, I'll just kind of walk everybody through Hunter just in case anybody's not familiar with it. So yeah, as Anne mentioned, we run a bug bounty program where we are effectively trying to, I guess, provide a means of generating meaningful amounts of money, incentives, whatever you want to call it, for the security research community and for the maintainers at large, by getting the enterprises who depend upon the open source software, the packages, the projects, whatever it might be, to basically foot the bill for this research in kind of like alternative models, alternative bug bounty models like, Bugcrowd, HackerOne, Synack, and the like. It's very easy. You've got an enterprise who's benefiting from a product, and then they look for security research against that product. And if their product improves in quality and in security, they're happy, their customers are happy, they earn more money, it's easy. But in the open source world, it doesn't necessarily work like that. A lot of maintainers aren't monetizing their code, but that doesn't mean that enterprises aren't depending upon it and using it to build products and systems and whatnot. So effectively what we look to do is, as mentioned, we work with enterprises to identify, components at risk or otherwise, and then, aggregate that money, across different companies, and use that to sponsor security research, and as well as, most importantly, paying for fixes. So I guess that's a big distinction against our program versus other, bug bounty boards, generally speaking, is that we dedicate a significant portion of the funds to actually going to the maintainer, kind of trying to create almost like a new revenue stream for open source. I guess in the past, kind of turning open source projects, at least, and I mean this in the case of applications, into commercial open source software has been pretty viable. But for things like packages, not so much. There hasn't been really a means of a way to monetize this. And I guess this is kind of the angle that we're trying to take on, which is these packages are used everywhere. Let's see if the enterprises who are the beneficiaries can start funding the research. We've had a rough history to date. We've been iterating hard and fast as we learn from the community, and we learn what works and what doesn't work. So I'm not going to defend any of the previous mistakes we've made. But this I'm just trying to talk about the kind of the vision, the dream, what we're trying to achieve. And then, we're just doing as best we can on the way to trying to make this work, and listening to feedback and iterating on the back of it. I guess that's the crux of it. Just more general information. We're a 5-person team in London. We're very early stage, so very early stage commercially and with regards to venture capital. I think that roughly covers everything about us and about what we're trying to do. But let me know how you want to take the conversation forward, if there's any specific questions or feedback or whatever it might be.
All right, team, does anyone have any opening thoughts you want to ask Adam, or just pose about bug bounty programs within open source? We're a community known for strong opinions. Except this one meeting, huh?
Sorry, 2 questions. So you're very similar to, I'm blanking on the name of the company, but they do something similar in this space where it's basically paying open source developers to just doing work in general on features and maintaining these projects. This is more but with security, what is the name of the company? Why am I blanking on the name currently?
So just on that, I think there's a couple of companies kind of trying to monetize feature or like bug fixes. So there's like Issue Hunt, or I think there's another one called Source, maybe Source Hunt. And I guess we're quite similar to Tidelift, which is another kind of company that tries to do this whole get enterprises to pay for some kind of value, with, I believe, Tidelift's major being around licensing support and all of this kind of stuff. But yeah, you could say that we're very close to these kind of like issue, pay for issue or pay for bug fix, or these kind of programs.
Just a quick observation. I just spotted that Bram Molnar, the Vim author, was on 17th on the leaderboard list, but I just briefly looked over some of the advisories. And are you a CNA, or are you requesting CVs through the existing CV system?
We are a CNA.
Okay. So this is probably a minor issue, but to me the CV, at least from the Vim side, looks a bit poor in terms of descriptions, and this CV metadata sort of applied. And I see some of them have not been uploaded either, but that could be other issues as well because they're 4 days old. So what sort of how much quality assurance do you sort of do or provide in terms of descriptions back upstream or upstream to CV and the CV databases and stuff?
So at the moment, everything is basically confirmed by maintainers. So we don't necessarily add an additional kind of like security qualification assurance above what a maintainer provides. So we trust the maintainer to make best judgment on severity scores, on all forms of metadata. With regards to the descriptions, this has been recently noted. Like I think 3 days ago, we saw a comment on Twitter. And so we did an active fix to address, like, can we include version fixes and this kind of stuff in the description. And we do have plans in the roadmap to make this more rich for clarity. But yeah, as mentioned, we're like a small team. So once we hear from the community what is wanted, this is when we'll, begin to work on that, as a function or as a capability. So I guess we're kind of playing reactively here. We're trying to follow the standards that CVE sets forth with regards to the CVEs. But then if we realize that we're doing something subpar per feedback, we do act and try to do better.
Go ahead. Sorry, you got a hand up.
Oh, I was just going to ask two questions of how do maintainers get access to the vulnerability information, and what are your disclosure policies when there's either an unresponsive maintainer or the maintainer doesn't want to use the platform?
That's a great question. So with regards to authorization models for vulnerability information, there's kind of, let's say, 3 scenarios. So the first scenario being maintainers already on the platform, we just ping them an email, they relog in, and they've got exclusive access to the report until they have validated it, fixed it, and that's when it becomes public. Or unless there's some form of embargo situation, which we can also support. Alternatively, if they are not on the platform, we go through one of 2 routes, which is we look for if there's a security contact in the security policy, security MD. We kind of have like this chain of logic to see, does the maintainer have an email on their profile? We kind of like exhaustively search for an email, basically. And if we find an email, we'll email them explaining who we are, our security community and whatnot. And then we'll provide them basically a magic link. So it requires no registration. They simply can click on this link and access full details of the report and have full normal access to the platform via this magic link. And last of all, and then generally speaking, we don't support anybody who doesn't have if they don't have a security MD with an email. So for example, if they're using a HackerOne submission-based process, we explicitly do not support this. We suggest to the researchers to disclose via their stated security policy. And lastly, if there is no security policy, we do open up a GitHub issue requesting, without providing any information about the vulnerability, just simply requesting, hey, we'd like to get in touch about the vulnerability. Can you create a security MD? So we know how to get in touch with you. That's broadly how we do authorization. If a maintainer doesn't want to use the platform, absolutely fine. If they don't validate it, we don't make it public at all. There is some discussions about in the future, if given there could be people at stake, if after a responsible disclosure period of, let's say, 3 months, if this time elapses and with fair warning to the maintainers about the vulnerability, including the vulnerability information itself, if we receive no comments back from them, no engagement from that side, we're considering adjusting our policy to make it public after this point in time. But if prior to this moment the maintainer has responded, or if they've said we don't want to go via your platform, perfectly fine. We delist them, their repository, and they won't be contacted any further with regards to the report. And we suggest to the researcher to directly disclose against them. But of course, they forfeit bounty and our CVE process and all this kind of stuff.
Jonathan, do you have another question?
So generally I have, hi, it's a pleasure. It's been a while. So I'm now doing full-time security research as of the beginning of this January. I do this interesting thing where I use CodeQL to find widespread security vulnerabilities across open source. And then I have a bot that I've written, and I work with a company called Modern, which is the project that I'm working with is called Open Rewrite. And when I find these widespread security vulnerabilities across open source, it's usually in thousands and thousands of repositories, I'm working with them to create rewrite rules, and then I will go and run a bot that I've written to generate thousands of pull requests to fix these security vulnerabilities across open source. So it's, I do generally write my code queries and then try to do private disclosure first. But when it comes to the scale of security vulnerabilities, when you have thousands of projects in front of you, you just can't scale security research to that sort of scale. But your platform sounds really interesting to me as a security researcher, at least, given what I'm doing actively. I think that regardless of this, we should definitely follow up after this meeting, because I think I have a lot of things to pick your brain about and discuss. So from the disclosure point of view, a researcher can come in and say, I have a disclosure policy, and that will be part of the disclosure process that your system handles. Is that accurate, or is there more nuance there? And it's yeah. How are you handling, a researcher comes in, they've got a disclosure policy. What is your I think the bigger question that I have is, what is your relationship with the researcher who's disclosing the vulnerabilities, and how does that play out?
So generally speaking, we operate a standard disclosure policy. So we do make the presumption that any maintainer who registers with the platform, as an example, and who doesn't have a specifically defined security policy, like in a security.md file, as an example, we go by our templated approach. We do have plans in our roadmap to provide more granularity to maintainers, to allow them to define things like what parts of the repository should be in scope, what types of vulnerabilities should be in scope to, for them to deal with to deal with the research and reports, and presenting this information to the researchers so that they don't have to waste their time finding vulnerabilities in files or against vulnerability classes that are necessarily in scope for this project. But just for clarity, this is to come. But as of right now, it is simply a standard disclosure policy that applies unless it is overridden by the security policy of the specific repository.
So the researcher doesn't define the policy. Then it's the platform hunter dev defines the policy, and the researcher is deciding, all right, I'm going to participate in hunter dev. The hunter dev policy trumps, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so we try to be, just for clarity here, we're trying to, we're trying to play like a fair intermediary, right? So we don't want to be require or force the signing of NDAs or require non-disclosure, in eternum kind of thing. We are trying to make something that works for both users. But just for clarity, and I just want to get this across, because I think that, at least in the past, with regards to past controversies, shall we say, right? It's always been a discussion about us versus maintainers, or security researchers, maintainers, all of these kind of things. But what we're really trying to hone in on here is that, well, the end people who are going to be affected by all this is the users of products being built with open source software, right? And so the way that we see it is we're trying to do best by them. We're trying to be like, listen, if we can find a vulnerability, if we can advise people to apply a patch, or if we can just cultivate a fix against vulnerabilities, so that enterprises can decide whether they want to adopt that patch. That's where we're kind of coming from, So hence why we're trying to be fair between the researcher and the maintainer. We're not trying to be too onerous or prescriptive to either party. We're trying to be fair. We think let's say a 3-month limit on embargo with regards to vulnerability information is probably about fair, unless if this is a massive 0-day log4j, log4shell kind of incidents, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, we try to play a fair game. We don't want to upset anybody, but we are conscious that in the end of the day, we're trying to protect users, and not necessarily protect the reputation of maintainers, but also not necessarily protect the reputation of researchers and this kind of stuff. So yeah.
And you have another question?
I do, yeah. So because you kind of brought up the past, the past controversy bit. And I think for the most part, things I've seen, concerns have been around ideas around project consent, and by default, your scope is all open source, so projects don't opt in. You mentioned you've been rethinking some of the ways you're doing things. I'm curious, what is your thinking on that today? Because I noticed you mentioned projects can now opt out, but they're still by default opted in, and you're thinking around kind of maintainer burden and workload, and what's your thinking on that these days?
Definitely. So I just so before getting into it, I just want to express that overwhelmingly the maintainers that we have worked to date have been overwhelmingly positive. I think we've worked with north of 1,000 or 2,000 maintainers in different projects, and all have been extremely pleasant with the experience and with our smooth disclosure process. And this is the first time for a lot of people that they are earning money from an open source project that they've developed. I think there was even a tweet just maybe 4 or 5 days ago of a maintainer expressing this, that I think he was saying that his package was downloaded something like 97 million times a month. Yet our fix was the first time he earned, I think he earned like $150 or $200, something like this. So overwhelmingly, we do hear positive feedback. Unfortunately, like on Yelp or something, anybody angry is more willing to write a negative review than people are willing to write positive reviews. And so we do, when there is a negative review, it's going to make it out on Twitter or whatever it might be, and it's going to be loud. With regards to like opt-in versus opt-out, to a large degree, our opinion hasn't changed, which is we perceive anybody who is writing code in the open is allowing for people to think, to tinker, and to contribute to their code in the open. Now, we could do something like selfish to a large degree, which would be, instead of reporting vulnerabilities against the original repositories, we could fork everything that we find a vulnerability in and simply put the vulnerability against our fork instead of the original repo. And even create a fix against that fork as an example. But I think what I'm just trying to get across here is like, from our perspective, people, by publishing their code in the open, are already opting in to have their code reviewed, criticized, contributed to. And that's where we come from. But of course, like, if we're not going to fight anybody if they don't, want to be part of the process for whatever reason, they're overwhelmed, or they just don't believe in it, or they don't want to monetize it. Who knows? We absolutely will oblige and prevent any future reports. I think that hopefully addressed your question, but I'm not sure if I missed something.
No, I'll have one last question that I know I've asked probably too many, so I'll let others talk. Do you have a sense of, I think bug bounty programs tend to be different from like a disclosure program because you're incentivizing that research. And I know, they can kind of have that high noise to signal ratio. Do you have a sense of what yours looks like for a project? Are you creating a lot of, I don't know, a 10% to 90% of high reward, high severity CVEs versus invalids and low signal issues? Or do you have a sense of what your percentages are there?
I'd say roughly speaking, I think 60% of reports that are validated to end up to be a positive validation rather than a negative validation. Of course, some of our users, because we're like the scope is limitless, a lot of our users will disclose against things that are never seen because maybe the maintainer no longer works on the project, or they're AFK or whatever it might be. But the majority of the stuff we do produce is valid and not invalid. With regards to noise, but we are conscious of it. Like, we don't want to put a burden on maintainers, because we do ask them to collaborate in the process. We hope that we fairly incentivize them to, but we do ask them to collaborate in the process. But we think we're acutely placed to build tooling to help them triage these reports. Fingers crossed in the future, let's say we're as big as Sneak or something, and hopefully we can hire triagers and the world is great, but we are looking to invest in controls, as mentioned earlier on Jonathan's question, to allow maintainers to acutely scope the type of vulnerabilities they want, what they find meaningful, these kind of things. to try to take away that kind of manual triage burden that you get a lot on bug bounty programs. I also think like if we just, when we've done kind of like internal reflections on this, and we look at, let's say, like if we take HackerOne as an example, with regards to noise versus signal, I think the unfortunate thing with proprietary bug bounty systems, or like bug bounty systems that focus on proprietary solutions, is that like the list is so small. So if you've got, you know, let's say, I'm not sure how many programs on a HackerOne, but let's say there's 10,000, I'm not sure, but because they've got, you know, 100,000 or 1 million users or 10 million users, you know, that's a very small attack surface for many people to enumerate on and all to be incentivized to find stuff against. Whereas in our case, the surface is so large that generally speaking, we find less overlap. There are, you know, some people are going to be motivated by, you know, the biggest bounties. So for example, once we started seeing stuff against Vim, like as Morten mentioned, we started getting more and more stuff against Vim, simply because like maybe it's quite old, you know, very little amount of maintainers, and it's written in, I guess, C or something. And so it, you know, opens up to like loads of memory management issues. And so we started getting, you know, many reports against this. But this is certainly an anomaly rather than what is normal for us. I think when we looked at the stats I think it was in Q3 or Q4, I think quarter on quarter, the amount of unique repositories we were finding reports against was basically, I think it was doubling each quarter. So we certainly are seeing a spread rather than people, you know, just farming against the same repositories over and over again. And to be honest with you, it's because we incentivize it like this. So we limit people from opening multiple reports pertaining to the same vulnerability type against the same repository. So if a person finds 10, I don't know, prototype pollutions against the same project, they won't, you know, spam 10 reports against the maintainer. We incentivize them to indicate the amount of occurrences of a vulnerability and to specify this in a single report. And we provide them a bonus in doing so. So instead what happens is, yeah, a single researcher against, I don't know, let's say like Lodash or something, if they find 10 prototype pollutions, it'll all be formatted in a single report, and there'll be 10 permalink references to the locations of those prototype pollutions. Yeah.
I had a question, Adam. I'm curious how connected you are with existing coordination communities that have existed for a long time, like OSSSec, distros list, and then another follow-up on that would be, are you plugged into the CertCC events platform that also is doing some coordination between orders and maintainers?
Not at all. So we have no existing relationships with any of these groups. Yeah, like when we—
That makes me sad.
Sorry, it's not, just for clarity, it's not out of intent. We just haven't had the opportunity to work with such brilliant people. Yeah, all we do with regards to try to not step on anybody's toes is we try to ensure that the researcher knows that this needs to be exclusively disclosed to us. We then exclusively share it with the maintainer, make sure that they are solely hearing about the vulnerability from us. And then we hope to federate the information via CVE. I thought this was the norm, but if there are other means of sharing this information, we're all ears, and we're happy to work with whomever wants to work with us.
Traditional Linux-based software has a very well-established CVD process where things are disclosed to the mailing list, and that gets out to all the appropriate downstream entities. I would suggest something to check out. We have 3 hands at once. I'm not certain who was first, so I will let the group wrestle over who talks first.
I think it was Morten. I think I saw Morten's hand first.
Yeah, because when Sira was mentioning OSS security, I was actually poking through the Vim CV assignments from Hunter Dev, and I actually found one of the complaints on OSS security regarding Hunter Dev. So that was a bit of the fun thing. But no, one of the fun thing, or well, not fun thing, but one of the points that were raised on OSS security regarding Hunter Dev was that some of the CVs that were assigned and not really disclosed, well, processes are hard to follow, so I'm not going to say it's properly followed, but some people pointed out that there's around 22 CVs that was assigned to Vim recently, with what I point out was sort of poor descriptions. But some of the issues as well was the fact that not all of the CVs assigned were necessarily issues that are crossing security boundaries expected in Vim, which makes them sort of false assignments in terms of the CV process, because they're not really like, not all crashes are security issues. Some of them are just simply the program failing. And some of the highlights, like from Alan Coppersmith from Oracle or Solaris Engineering, was that they don't really see how these are security issues. And this sort of loops back around to some of the quality assurance CNAs should be doing before assigning CVs and publishing them as CVs. And well, it's just a reestablishment of maybe the lack of the QA, which is being done though. But it seems to me that there's a lot of CVs assigned which are not necessarily security issues, and these put on more pressure for us, or me as a downstream distribution that does this in my volunteer time, having to assign or fix these CV issues or address them properly. And it also doesn't like help that these are not like properly, because again, we don't have a process. It's just informal things and formal announcements. So it's a little bit unfortunate maybe, because it creates a little bit of noise, which is probably not intended from your side. But yeah, it's just a reiteration of the issue probably.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, we are aware, and we're actively discussing internally about whether we need to enact another change to try to disincentivize this kind of mass creation of CVs once a big project with such a receptive maintainer is identified by our community. But I think, and listen, I'm not sure what CV's perspective on all of this is, but the way that we see it is that in the end of the day, Bram, in effect, is the one validating and requesting a CVE by validating as whatever the CVSS score is, vulnerability on our platform. And so similarly as if, you know, I'm not sure, like Sony or Mitsubishi or any other one of the CNAs, if they wanted to issue not proper CVEs for their products, they should have full permission to do so. At least that's my belief, but maybe CV has a different opinion on the matter. So, and that's at least the situation. That's at least the position that we've taken on it today, which is like, if a maintainer wants to issue a CVE for whatever their project is, that they should be able to issue one. We shouldn't impede them by placing our subjective opinion on it. So that's at least how we've treated it today. But we are, as mentioned, constantly thinking of, should we change tack or do something. But yeah, I'm not sure if GitHub takes a certain position on this by the security advisories functionality, like if GitHub will take an opinion upon whether they will issue a CVE if a maintainer has requested one. But from our standpoint, yeah, if the maintainer asks for one, we will assign and publish one.
Since we were mentioned, same for us. If someone starts a draft advisory in their repository that they own and request a CVE, we will almost always say yes to that, given that it is a legitimate CVE and not, you know, sometimes people just put pictures of cats or something. So yeah.
Quick question with GitHub. Do you do any form of manual validation, or do you just auto accept everything?
Nope, we've got a security lab team, which was 3 folks, and we're now doubling that, who go through every CVE request by hand. And again, check and make sure it's not pictures of cats, but also that it's legitimate and not some kind of malware download.
Yeah, okay, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, with HackerOne, we also do a manual review process for every single one that goes through. It is quite a bit of work, but
that's how a large commercial headwear-based company also performs their triage and evaluation annually.
I will not stop any of you donating money to us to allow us to also build a manual capability to review these CVEs. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I over here sent an email to the CVE board yesterday saying, hey, I generate thousands of pull requests to fix security vulnerabilities across open source. None of them get disclosed because they just get merged. How can I automate CVE disclosure of these things? Because otherwise nobody's getting notified. I have yet to get an email response, but it's this challenge of like, is it better to inform the industry that there was a vulnerability, but it's been merged and fixed? Or is it better to just get it fixed? Because I don't have the time to do CVE issuance for thousands of projects. So, and I don't know where that boundary is, and I don't know if anybody knows how to answer that question.
If you don't hear back from them, Jonathan, let me know later this week. I'll poke the CVE board for you. Thank you. Will do.
Yeah, I know that the distributed weakness filing project has been dissolved. They were going to create pirate CVEs, which were a CVE number is a CVE number. Well, their idea was a CVE number is a CVE number. And if the CVE, their idea was that a number is a number. A CVE is a copyrighted thing. It's an open source copyrighted thing. The licensing on the CVE thing states that you can use it for whatever you want. The CVE board felt differently on that topic, and they actually came here and talked to us about that a while back. It is one of the few recordings this group does have up in Git. Oh, I'm really curious. Can you send me a link to that? Because I would love to hear that. I will track it down on the, they came 3 times. Okay. And I can't recall, I know we got them recorded the last time around, but I'll track that down. But that's really good. The use of the term CVE is protected. So they could have called it whatever they wanted to using the same format. But I thought that they moved it to a project under the Cloud Security Alliance. Yeah, it is. It's been, and they're using different identifiers completely. I've been bouncing back and forth with Kurt and those guys chatting about it because I've been curious, Anywho, so I'm currently in a situation where I sometimes I don't know, what is the best way to handle this? I have a lot of vulnerabilities. I'm going to go fix them, but I can't disclose them because there are thousands of projects, right? Like, how do you do that well? And I don't have any good answers there. The question that that's totally not with respect to Hunter Dev. The question that I have for the Hunter Dev team, how do you guys handle disagreements between the security researcher and the maintainer about whether or not certain thing is a vulnerability or not? And what is the, I mean, I know that it can change from case to case, but that's one of the reasons why I've kind of started moving my own disclosures into my own hands and starting to write up my disclosures independently. I've had conflicts with the Apache Foundation where they've been like, I've said this is a vulnerability. They've been like, no, it's not. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get a CVE phone number for it. And their response is, well, we're a CNA for the Apache Foundation. You can't get one. And then I, of course, have figured out since then that there's an arbitration, there's not an arbitration, there's an appeals process you can go through to get a CVE without, their permission. I've never exercised it, but it's there. So, I just want a number to say, here's a vulnerability, they didn't fix it, or here's a number of vulnerability, they did fix it. That's what matters to me. How do you guys handle that need from the research community?
So till today, up to date, generally speaking, we do side with the maintainer. So only on explicit validation from the maintainer will we ever issue a CVE for a vulnerability. We do have a policy, which is as mentioned, if the maintainer invalidates the vulnerability, or if in the future a certain period of time elapses, we will publicly disclose the report so that people can become aware of it. Whether we would issue CVE for such a report, this is an unanswered question yet. We've discussed internally about peer review mechanisms or otherwise to try to create a consensus about vulnerability. But yeah, as of today, we would have to say we would side with the maintainer. And to answer your not question, but to plug us. We have an API, so you could theoretically use our API to, do things.
So one of the things that I've had issues with HackerOne is you say, I'm going to disclose anyways, or I'm going to get a CVE, and it usually doesn't come up with CVEs because most HackerOne programs and bug-crowd programs are not, ship software, it's SaaS software, right? But if you're dealing with software that's shipped and you need a CVE, or you think as a maintainer, with HackerOne and bug-crowd, there's this kind of hanging over your head risk that you'll get ejected from the platform if you challenge the platform's decision on that. And that means a loss of income stream from your security research. Is that same risk established here? Or if you say, we're not going to do it, but you're welcome, is it you as a researcher are welcome to do what you wish. If you want to go get a CVE number on your own, you can, we're not going to get in your way. Or is there the maintainer has spoken and we're going to side with them, and if you go against that, we will eject you from our platform?
No, definitely not. So we actually took the decision quite early on that if there was any reason that a maintainer invalidates a report, bar a ongoing duplicate, the report should default to public, so that the researcher could share it, or as you mentioned, try to get a CV against it. And this is just in stark contrast because you hear these horror stories about VDPs or bug bounty platforms where they get marked informational, they get marked as who knows what, and then you're you're obliged by NDA or whatever it might be to never disclose about the report again, because maybe it was a private program or who knows. But in our case, explicitly, unless it's a ongoing duplicate, that would be the only scenario where it is locked until the embargo lifts on the initial report. That's the only the conditions that we work by.
I had similar clarification on your exclusivity and terms and all that stuff, but you answered part of it. So, other part, I got a little confused when you were talking about a situation where a project would say, no, we don't want to work with this platform. In that case, is the vulnerability researcher, is that considered owned by Hunter? Is it owned by the researcher and they could go resell it, or they could sit on it indefinitely? Or what kind of terms do you have around those situations?
It's a great question, actually. So I if I recall the legals, I think explicitly, I think either they grant us ownership or we get, some kind of exclusive license to the vulnerability research. But just for clarity, we would never look, and following this call, I actually seek to change the T's and C's to basically say, in the event that a maintainer is being asked to leave the platform, and so we invalidate the report, the research should return to the ownership of the researcher. It's only whilst the maintainer is on platform or the vulnerability is still pending, do we act as kind of like a guiding hand in the process. The second it is invalidated, we present that information on our website publicly. If the researcher wanted to then go and try to submit it to an alternative program or whatever it might be, all for them. We don't explicitly want to own this information. Does that answer your question?
Oh, now I have it. I think I'm getting a little confused. So the report, because you said the report gets invalidated, or let's say the maintainer says, I don't want to use this platform. Then you're saying it automatically releases publicly?
If they say to us, so if they mark it as invalid, then yes, it does become public, right? But if they email us and say, oh, we don't want to use your platform, or something to this effect, and so this would, from a system perspective, this means the report is pending, then we will not publicly disclose this report. We will make the report private. We will bar future disclosures from this for this repository, or even an entire organization if that's what's requested. And then the researcher can choose to go via MITRE or whatever it might be.
And the IP of the research would go back to the researcher, and they could do whatever they want to do.
Whatever they would like to do, yeah.
I'm not certain if you participate, Adam, but something you may wish to do research on top of the other existing CVD entities, there is a bug bounty community of interest. It accounts for researchers, entities like a HackerOne or a Bug Crowd, and just vendors that are looking to create a bug bounty or a VDP program. So that might be something you guys want to participate in, or at least research what's going on.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, definitely, we'll take a look at it. I think there's a lot of great resources out there actually. Even like I think is it Bug Crowd that created Disclose.io and their kind of like information set on VDPs. So yeah, no, we're like certainly looking for more and factoring that in the whole kind of product evolution.
If you're looking at disclosure.io, I feel like this group would be remiss not to plug our own coordinated disclosure guide. So let me find you the link to that. It is written specifically for to be read by open source maintainers who are trying to set up coordinated disclosure for their project.
I posted a link in the chat.
Thank you.
It's one of the 500 tabs I always have open. My computer is normally very slow. We've had a lot of us ask a lot of questions. I want to give the rest of the group an opportunity. Is there anything you're curious about? Any comments you want to make? And we're getting towards the top of the hour. And almost half of us haven't had a question or thought yet. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk if you are so inclined.
I should probably mention that HackerOne also has a free open source, free essentially bug bounty or VDP programs that you can set up if you have an open source project.
Could you post us a link, Crystal, so we can put that in the notes?
Yeah.
And I've been furiously trying to take notes. Please, I'd like other folks to take a look and make sure I capture.
I'll post it in the notes.
Last time I tried to use that, it had a limitation where you can only have one account accessing the profile for that offering that you had for open source. Only allowed one account. Is that still a limitation?
Should not. I don't believe that's a limitation. You could. I think that would be worth maybe sending an email to myself or probably me about that.
And I can look into a while. I tried setting up one for Gradle, and I think we ran into that limitation where it's like if you wanted to, or like I think so. Gradle, we were an open source company. I think we wanted to essentially do that and then offer swag. And I think that as soon as we said we wanted to have multiple accounts and offer swag, I think that's when it kicked into okay, now we're going to charge you for this stuff.
Multiple programs. Or just
one program. We were trying to set up a program for Gradle. I'm not there anymore, but and we actually, yeah. But I remember I think that one of the limitations was for this account that you're creating for the organization. You can only have one account. You can only have one one HackerOne account log into that. Otherwise, you have to start paying for the full version of HackerOne. That was my experience, if I remember.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if it's still the same thing. That's why I'm asking.
There is a limitation if it's a for-profit business. Then those typically would require some investment. But if not, then I believe you should be able to set up one program. So yeah, let me know. Just follow up with and email me if you still have that question, and I can look into it.
Anne has an excellent point in the chat. Adam, you have an amazing collection of personalities and different representations from vendors and projects and researchers. Do you have any questions for this group you would like answered? Thank you, Anne.
No, I like, let me think, being put on the spot a bit. So I think from our perspective, and also the reason why we reached out to Anne and how we got introduced to C-Rob was we're currently, so just for clarity, as mentioned, we're super early stage. And so up and we only started basically to talk to enterprises about how to tie them into this kind of trinity of people this quarter. And so we're early stages on this. And so we're trying to talk to enterprises to start beginning to understand their wants and needs when it comes to when it comes to mitigating risk around using open source software specifically. And so I guess this is an open request to anybody listening who might be of interest in collaborating with us on trying to identify a better way to how we can use our resources, this community, and what we've built to date to try and identify a new way to mitigate risk for enterprises and developers who use open source software. It's so funny because I read about every day on Hacker News, people suggesting ideas of maybe new ways that open source could be used and how the benefit from the enterprise can flow back to the company. And this is kind of the avenue that we want to go down. We're not trying to do kind of like source composition analysis like many of the existing organizations. We want to build something new. And so yeah, just an open request to see if anybody wants to collaborate on helping us to try to achieve this. And I guess if there's a request for me to come back and answer more questions or anything like that, if anybody wants this, they're happy to oblige and this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that's basically it from me. I also think, just to add on to Crystal's point about HackerOne and its open source community edition, I feel like we should also plug IBB, their Internet Bug Bounty program. Caught up with Kayla, the team lead, I think just last week, had a great conversation, and it's an awesome program. So just thought I'd put that there as well.
Are you in the Slack, the Open Source Security Foundation Slack?
Am I in it? No, I don't. I haven't found a means to join it. So if somebody could send me a link or something, I'll happy to join.
I would love to chat with you more after this is over. Last question that I have for you is when you compare the payouts for the security researcher against open source, the payouts here compared to like large enterprise open source security or large enterprise security, like the payouts are disparately different, right? And I presume that's mostly to do with like, I recognize you're, just getting started, right? Small company. Are you able to sell these large organizations on this idea from the perspective, like, this is something that you should be sinking a lot of money into in order to finance, like bringing up the payouts for these things? Or are you trying to stay at these current rates? Like I recognize, like, smart up trying to get going, but by comparison, right, like the payouts are small, and if you stick at these payouts, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's still not like the kind of thing that you're gonna get like the big people that want to do security research and like are getting the tons of money from the big corporations to look at this stuff. How are you? I mean, is that a long-term roadmap, or is that like we just need a couple of big investors to make that possible?
So we understand from a business model perspective how this can actually work. So we haven't cracked like an enterprise product yet, but we understand from an economics perspective how this can work, which is, given that generally speaking, that you should be earning the highest bounties against the most popular open source projects out there, and these highly popular projects will be depended upon by the most organizations. If we can even ask for $1 or $2 from these organizations, you're starting to talk about seriously large sums of capital. Like this one, I can't remember. If we take, for example, I don't know, Node Fetch, how many millions of organizations worldwide, rely upon Node Fetch as an example. And if we could ask for even 10 cents from this, from them, this is massive amounts of capital that can then go towards paying for not only security research, but also whatever remediation is required in the projects. So from an economics perspective, we understand how the bounties can scale as we grow our commercial capability. But as you mentioned, because we are a startup, it's still early stages, this is money coming from us. And so we have to put in, cost controls. But the way that I see it is looking into the future. As we begin to scale, get more customers and whatnot, we should be able to significantly drive up bounty prices. I would say comparable to the top bug bounty programs on HackerOne or any of its competitors. I guess my goal is in the next 2 years to be able to generate our own, hacker millionaires or something like this.
Very nice. I want to thank Adam for coming in and staying up so very late to talk with us. Really appreciate it. And thanks to the group for the polite dialogue. This was excellent. Reminder to kind of key in on this topic of researcher relations. That felt like that was what the next project the group wanted to circle back around on and start to work to identify the how we can help pain points between researchers and maintainers. So if anyone has any alternative ideas, projects we want to collaborate on, let me know, but I'm going to propose that'll be what we'll start to toil away on next. We think that's an area we can add some value to try to help provide some guidance and good practice around. Thanks to everybody. Really appreciate your time. Enjoy your weeks. We'll see you here in 2 again. Cheers, Adam.
Thanks all.
Thank you.